All right, so for today's roundtable discussion, I really want to begin with this topic here because it's very fresh in our minds. I'm sure you've seen the news in the wider Jewish community here in Phoenix and maybe even across the world. But on Shabbat morning at exactly 11:50 a.m., a precious soul passed away. She was just 16 years old after battling a very rare type of cancer. Her name is Shana Wellner of blessed memory. She's the daughter of Yaakov and Rachel Wellner from the Chabad community in Phoenix. Some of you may know them, but it is really a tragedy of just unimaginable proportions. And the question here, therefore, is understandable. And that's the question of how do you explain the inexplicable? How to begin to understand the passing of a child? I don't know that there is an answer to that question. I really don't. I think that the finite mind cannot always comprehend and grasp the infinite mind of God. After all, is the God that we don't just understand, but we sometimes just have to believe in. And I wouldn't want a God, as a Hasidic master said, I wouldn't want a God that I can fully understand all the time. Why need a God like that? If I understand him, then I'm that God. I want a God that's beyond me sometimes, beyond me in good ways, not in bad ways, not in tragic ways. But again, it points to this idea that God is infinite and I'm finite, and therefore I'll never be able to understand these types of questions. But I do think, as we've said many times, that the Jewish response should not be, the Jewish question should not be why. Why do tragedies like this happen again? Because we don't have answers. Until Mashiach comes, Prophet says that when Mashiach comes, Isaiah says that we'll be able to look back and say, oh, the Hashem ki naftabi, thank you, God, for doing all of these things to me. Now I can understand them. But until that point, we cannot ask the why question, but we have to ask the what can we do about it question. The void will always be there. The tragedy will always be a tragedy. Anyone who minimizes it, even by trying to answer the why, is not speaking on behalf of Judaism. Because in Judaism, we recognize that, yes, life has tragedies, life has evil, life has moments that are inexplicable. But instead of just leaving that void empty, we have to try and fill it with as much meaning and as much positivity as possible. Because with every loss of life, we have less light in this world, less life in this world. And therefore, if we truly love that person and that person's legacy was about life, it was about light, it was about joy, it was about filling this world with goodness, then we ought to honor that person with doing exactly that, filling this world with goodness and replacing the light that has now left us. That's the way Judaism has always responded to tragedies, whether collective ones or individual ones. It doesn't take away the pain, and it doesn't take away that void. Void is still there, but we can respond to it by, again, adding more and more light. And that's why I found it truly moving that Shana, who passed away, by the way, celebrated her 16th birthday. I wrote about this past Thursday. And 2 days later, she passes on. It's also like unfathomable. But for her 16th birthday, she asked everyone to contribute to her mitzvah bank, to a mitzvah campaign, 1,600 mitzvot. Why 1,600? Because she was turning 16, so 16 times 100. Within a few hours, there were many more than 1,600 mitzvot. That shows, it's a testament to Shana, how much she loved people, how much people, therefore, loved her in return. There were some 8,000 mitzvot within a few hours. Now, when she passed away, the family decided to increase that campaign and try and reach a goal of 16,000. Again, number 16, because that was her age, times now 1,000. 16,000 mitzvot by Shavuot, which falls tomorrow night. So I encourage you to go online, fill in your mitzvah. We sent the link out yesterday. And if not, maybe I'll send it to you, Janet, and you can send it to the whole group. And take upon yourself a mitzvah. It could be really anything. It could be just giving charity once. It could be lighting Shabbat candles once or as many times as you can. It could be taking upon yourself a mitzvah that is either permanent or temporary. That's what she wanted, and that's really the best way to respond to death and to this type of unfathomable tragedy. Now, we'll add just one more thing, and that is that famous statement of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. Now, Zamavyadi, the author of the Tanya, who lived some 300 years ago, would very often say, which, by the way, has been proven scientifically, that darkness is not an existence in and of itself. Darkness has no existence, not even scientifically. There's nothing there. So what is darkness? The absence of light. And therefore, when we encounter darkness, what we need to do is increase the light. And then darkness will automatically go away because there's no existence there. There's no substance whatsoever. And in his words, he would say a little bit of light dispels a lot of darkness. That's the truth of life. When we experience darkness, we can wallow in it, wallow in that darkness, in that pain, and fall into the abyss of depression. Or we can say what Jews have said for 3,000 years, and we've experienced plenty of darkness, and that is that we ought to increase the light. And hopefully by every one of us increasing that light, by doing that mitzvah, that darkness will eventually go away. But that's really the Jewish approach, and therefore, I don't know if we can explain the inexplicable, but we can certainly respond to it by adding more light. That's that. Yes, Sarah. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so the Talmud says that people who pass away on Shabbat, it is a sign that they were righteous. Why? Because their souls that are holy almost synchronize with the holiness of Shabbat. Also because on Shabbat, the gates of hell are closed. Once a week, God closes the gates of hell. And therefore, one who passes away on Shabbat goes straight to paradise, which is again a sign that they are completely righteous. So no doubt, she was a righteous woman. She was really, she was friends with my daughter, Nina, and she was always so full of love, so full of selflessness. I remember being, it's a short anecdote, but there's so much to learn from her. Again, to continue to shine her light and continue to learn from these ways so that we can adopt those ways in our own lives. But you were at KTR. I don't know if you're familiar with KTR. KTR is a trampoline place not too far away from you, with a skateboard ring and scooter ring, whatever. The place that kids love. And if KTR is listening to this, they better give us some donation for this pub. But KTR, I was there with my kids, and she happened to be there with her siblings. This was about a year ago, and she then anyway we're there together. My daughter Chana was there too, and at one point I see my daughter Chana taking my littlest daughter, my baby daughter Adina, to the bathroom to change her diaper. So she goes and she takes her to the bathroom, and then Shayna, the one who passed away, leaves a message about an hour later to Nina, a friend, my oldest daughter, and she says to her, "I want you to know you have such a special sister, Chana. I saw her changing the diaper, and it's so special." Just the fact that she left a voice note is already a big thing, because people are so absorbed in themselves, they don't even pay attention to anything. And to just give a good word so that someone else feels good is a big thing in and of itself. But that wasn't just the wonders of Shayna. The wonders of Shayna was that thereafter I learned from Chana that it wasn't Chana who changed the diaper. It was Shayna who helped Chana change the diaper. So yeah, she is so selfless to not even take credit for herself. But this is the type of person she was in every sphere of life. And there's so much to learn from that selflessness, from that giving, from that perspective of being other-oriented, not self-oriented, as we often say. And that's how we ought to continue to live. Right. I think the two biggest issues with my daughter and her friends, Shayna's friends, and in general with kids who lose a friend or a loved one, is number one, how do you explain it? Right? Like, no question. Number two, what happened to all of our prayers? Shayna was sick for a while, and so many people prayed, and it's as if God shut the door. It's like, so regarding one, I say what I said to you now to my children. And I think children, by the way, are more spiritual than we are. They can connect to that. But two, regarding the prayers, we really believe in Judaism that no prayer goes unanswered. Every prayer from the heart is answered. And sometimes it's just not answered the way we want it to be answered. So maybe it reduced her pain a little bit. Maybe her prayers helped bring her body, which was a little bit involved in that, which is an ordeal in and of itself. She died in New York, or she was being treated for the past few months, and we had to ship her body back to Phoenix, and it wasn't easy. We had to find a private jet to do that, etc. But maybe her prayers helped make that happen, as I was telling Nina. So we never know how prayers are answered, but we do believe that all of the prayers are answered, sometimes not in the way that we want them to be answered. But they also connect to that too. Janet, you had a question? Yeah. Yeah. She was. Yeah, she was. I think that the parents were not religious, became religious, right? Yeah.
It's just interesting to talk about the kind of girl she was.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. 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 Yes, Hannah. Mm-hmm.
And when I to the States, I was watching the New York film. They actually rolled the casket by 777.
Right.
And that's how they started it.
Right.
And the other thing I was going to say, on my case, is that this year my daughter's roadside, in her birthday, on the same day. And that's because every once in a while that happens.
Right. Wow.
And that's awesome.
Right. Absolutely. There's no doubt. Did she pass on her birthday, or just happens to be?
It was out of the Jewish.
Yeah.
But somehow I keep the old side of Jewish, but then I
Right.
keep the dad and the
Right.
other.
Right. Yeah.
So, like this year.
Yeah. Right. No doubt. She was righteous too. But relating to your first point, I think that's a good segue to this other question of burial and Shiva. But it's interesting because you're right. Before Shana was placed onto that plane to come to Phoenix, the casket at least was, and her body was placed into that plane with her parents, who were on that plane too. Her living parents, thank God, and may they be well and alive, and comforted from the heavens. But the casket passed by the headquarters of Chabad, where the Lubavitcher Rebbe spent his days and nights attending to the world altogether. 770 Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn, New York. And only thereafter did she continue on her journey back to Phoenix. Now, why? Now, I'll add to that also that before she was escorted to the Mount Sinai Cemetery, where she was buried on Monday. They also stopped by her school, her high school, and they had all the children come out and pay their last tribute and say Tehillim, say Psalms in her honor. So why do we do that? Right? And it's part of the burial. This is the other question that we have here. What are the different rituals within Judaism regarding burial and Shiva? So why do we do that? Because of the tremendous belief that the body may die, but the soul doesn't die. The soul is forever alive. Now, the soul and the body have an interesting relationship while they are alive, because they have to work together. They're forced to work together. The soul can't achieve anything without the body being its vessel. And the body can't achieve anything without the soul, otherwise it would be dead. So they have an interesting relationship. It's an interesting one also because the body and the soul really have two separate desires. The body wants to do bodily things, right? It wants to sleep, it wants to have a good massage, and it wants to eat. The soul doesn't care about that. The soul wants to do good. The soul wants to pray. The soul wants to be kind. The soul wants to change a diaper. The soul wants to do all of that. And the body is not interested. So they have to learn how to work together throughout this life. We experience that all the time. There's a tremendous battle happening all the time in here. But because they've developed this interesting relationship throughout their lifetime, or the body's lifetime, the soul's lifetime is eternal. When they are separated, after a person's passing, when the body is interred, and the soul goes back to heaven, the soul has a tough time dealing with that separation. was in a body for so long. And the soul doesn't quite understand what is happening to her because it's been accustomed to be in a body. So the soul hovers upon the body for quite a while. The Talmud says for 3 days, some say for 7 days. It says, is this me now? Am I still in the body or am I not in the body? This is my other half, but is it still? Or maybe now I'm completely separated from it. Now, it goes back to all of its functions within that body. It goes back to the soul, in a way, imagines that it's still eating, that it's still going to school, that it's still doing all these activities, because again, it was a part of that body for so long. And that's why we escort the casket to the places in which the body and the soul were in complete harmony, like school, like the Chabad headquarters, where she felt like this was a fuel station, a spiritual fuel station. And in a way, it brings much comfort to the soul, knowing that, okay, I'm passing by these places in which my soul felt at ease, and my soul felt connected, my soul felt in control. And in a way, it will enable the soul itself also to strengthen itself and be comforted. So that's why we pass by. But that has a lot to do with the burial and Shiva, because the burial really is our way of telling the soul, you can now rest. How so? Because as the soul is hovering upon the body, the soul wants to first and foremost know that its body, its counterpart, is resting. Once it sees that it is resting in this hole in the ground, then the soul says, okay, my counterpart is resting, now I can rest and move on. And that's why, by the way, one should have the funeral as soon as possible. That's why they were so much in a hurry to have it. She passed it on Shabbat. Thank God they were able, which is really amazing, they were able to have it on Monday, even though that needed to transport the body and all the bureaucracy and paperwork. But because, again, the soul can't fully rest until it sees its counterpart resting. That is also why during the burial, the custom, as many of you know, is to take a shovel and pour some soil inside the resting place. Why? Because together we are building a burial or resting place for the body. And when the soul sees that, it brings a comfort. Oh, you guys are participating and taking care of my body. Thank you. And it brings extra comfort and extra rest to the soul, again, that hovers upon it. It can't rest until it's fully. So it's a great mitzvah, really, to pour that soil and to build that resting place. That's one of the reasons we do that. Another thing we do during a funeral is in having in mind that the soul is there. By the way, there's many signs to it. The Zohar says that, we've spoken about this, that souls are carried by flying objects. And very often, I notice that all the time. You see birds, you see butterflies, you see all these things at funerals that you would not usually see. There's no doubt that that's the sign that the soul is, as we said, hovering upon the body. But because the soul is there, part of the funeral is also to recite eulogies. Because when the soul hears that it has had an impact on this world, it also brings it comfort and strength. So we say eulogies not just to mourn or to boast, but really we say eulogies to bring comfort to the soul that is there, to bring us some nachas, as they call it. Another part of the burial, and I relate to that question, another part of the burial, which is also a very important part, is that, just from a Jewish perspective, is that there is a casket that is fully sealed. I know that in other religions, you have an open casket. Now, we have in mind that the soul is looking at the body and it doesn't want the body to be exposed in a way that may even seem slightly disrespectful to the body. And therefore we cover it, because the body wouldn't want to be seen in such a way. And when the soul says, oh, they're taking care, they're respecting my body, and there's other things that we do to respect the body, like tahara and everything, it also brings tremendous comfort to the soul. And therefore, the one of the utmost goals of every funeral and the preparations to the funeral is to respect that body as much as we can. So that's another aspect of the Jewish burial, again, that relates to This idea that the soul is with us, watching our every move and our every word. Yes. Hannah. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little about Israel? Because in Israel, they don't use it.
Right, that's a different story, but they do cover the body fully with a talit.
Yeah, what they do is they actually carry the body in the streets. And I remember as a child, they had so many.
Yeah. Right. So in Israel, they bury the body without a casket, even though the body is fully covered by a talit. And the reason for that is because the soil of Israel is holy. And therefore, the holy body can be interred in a holy soil. Here, outside of Israel, the soil is not holy. And therefore, we separate the holy body with the unholiness of the soil by using a casket.
So it has nothing to do with the Mashiach.
No, so nothing to the Mashiach coming. No. There is an exception in Israel, though, and that is that all soldiers that die in battle are buried in a casket. Why? Because unfortunately, some soldiers don't come back in one piece. And not to discriminate between soldiers, we bury all of them in caskets. That's why. That shows the sensitivity of our nation, too. All right, that's burial. Regarding Shiva, which is the other part of the question. Yes, sure.
The shovel.
Yeah.
It's the custom, I mean, I always thought the custom was for the shovel to be turned and lately.
Good. Right. Good question. We don't go into all these rituals, even though we may, but that's a very good point. So when we use that shovel to pour some soil, there are two things that we have to be cognizant of. Number one, we don't pass the shovel from hand to hand. Why? Because we still have to show that we are reluctant to be carrying out this mitzvah. It's not something that we wanted, that we desired, something that was imposed on us. So to express that reluctance, we don't pass the shovel. But there is another ritual that pertains to that custom of pouring some soil with the shovel, and that is that we turn the shovel around. So we don't use the inside of the shovel as we would use to carry soil within it, but we use the outside of the shovel, right? You know what I'm relating to? Also to show our reluctance and to say, look, we don't really want to do this. We have to do it, and therefore we are doing it. But it's not something that we desire to do whatsoever. So we do that. Some do it only once. They start off like this, and then for the other pours, they use the inside of the shovel. Yes, Anita. Right. So there is the Chabad custom, and some other customs is not to offer any eulogies. Their perspective is because sometimes eulogies seem to be quite extravagant. And there is one thing that is despised in the world to come, and that's lies. That's why it's called Olam HaEmet, the world of truth. So it could be a danger for the soul if something that she did, they say she did and she did not do, is brought to the heavens. It said it was then the Beth Din, the court that is welcoming her, will say, oh, they said you did this. Did you? You didn't quite do it. So it brings embarrassment to the soul. We don't want to do that either. And therefore, they say no eulogies whatsoever. But it emphasizes the point that people who do say eulogies have to be careful with their words. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. All right, that's burial. I mean, the other customs of burial, but basically, let me just summarize it by saying that there are two parts to every Jewish burial. One part is the part of the eulogies and some of the prayers in front of the casket. The other part is escorting the casket to its final resting place and then burying the body. And by the way, one thing we did not mention is that after everyone pours some soil, here in Arizona, it's not like that in every state, but then they cover the casket with a big cover made of stone. And that's really to preserve the casket over the years. But only once, that's important because only once the casket is completely covered, some wait for the whole, like they did during the funeral on Monday, for the whole to be completely covered with soil. Only then do the mourners say the Kaddish. Why? Because if the job hasn't been finished, then again, the body is not resting fully yet because it doesn't have a fully built resting place. And the soul, therefore, is still not fully comforted. We have to build it fully. And once it's built fully, then we can say to the soul, okay, Yitgadal v'Yitkadash, and you can be comforted too because that burial place has been built. So that's another important point, but that's the second part of the burial ceremony. And then at the very end, the mourners are asked to walk in between two human lanes in which the people attending the funeral say the Hamakom and Achem Etchem, the traditional blessing to the mourners, in which we wish them, may God comfort you among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. That's the burial. Let's go to the Shiva and speak about the main points or the main customs of Shiva. So as we all know, after a loved one passes on, and when I say loved ones, in this case, I'm relating to the 7 relatives. There are 7 relatives in Jewish law, and those are one's father, mother, brother, sister, God forbid, daughter, son, and spouse. Those are the 7 relatives. For them, we have to mourn. Then we have to tear our clothes, which happens at the burial, which we don't speak about. And for them, we have to sit Shiva. Sitting Shiva is sitting for 7 days. Now, the funeral day is considered as 1 day, even though the funeral might have been at 3 p.m., 4 p.m., or whatever it is, but it's considered 1 full day. And the last day, even though we rise from Shiva at the morning, that last day is also considered 1 full day. So there are really 5 days in which was 5 full days in which was sitting Shiva. And then there's the funeral day and the last day in which we rise in the morning. But during those 5 plus 2 days, we sit Shiva. What does that mean? The mourners have to ensure that they indeed are focusing solely during those 7 days on mourning, on their beloved. To not just cry, but in a way, again, to see how they can fill that void and celebrate their lives. And therefore, they cannot go to work during those 7 days. They should stay home in one place where their focus is in its ultimate state. Therefore, mirrors are covered so that they don't now start indulging into self, images, etc., but rather focus again on the deceased. Therefore, they open up their homes for services and for visitors to come and speak about the deceased. And again, have that the focus. And encourage them to do mitzvahs like Shayna's family is doing now, as we mentioned before. But again, every single custom and law of the Shiva ritual is founded on this idea that we must focus on the deceased during that time period. Now, the deeper, more spiritual and mystical aspect of the Shiva is that, again, the soul doesn't quite know where it is. So it saw its body being buried. So it knows that it's not in the body, but is it still living in this world? And apparently the soul visits the home where the mourners are sitting, at least for the first 3 days. I'm saying for 7 days, and that's why we sit for 7 days, because the soul is there. After Shiva, after 7 days, that's when, according to Kabbalah, the soul recognizes, okay, not only am I not in the body anymore, but I'm also not living on planet Earth anymore. So it's time for me to move on. But that's why we also sit Shiva, because we know that the soul is there. And that's why, by the way, speaking of words, we have to be extremely careful to speak only words that can make the soul happy and gives the soul some nachas, and of course bring comfort to the mourners too. We have to be very careful, and that's why Jewish law says that even if you are coming to visit the mourners, not only should you not speak about, the playoffs, the NBA playoffs of last night, in which the Celtics won finally after 3-0, but you should also not speak about anything that the mourners don't want you to speak about, just to bring them, not to increase their pain, so to speak. And of course, if you are going to speak, then speak about Shayna, or in this case, speak about the one that is deceased and the great impact that she has had in this world. That brings also a lot of comfort and a lot of nachas. But that's how comportment in the house of Shiva. All right, let's move on to other topics. next topic here is interfaith marriage. Let's touch upon that. So, and it goes deeper, as you were explaining, right? It's not confidential. That's all I can tell to you. But it goes deeper, as you're explaining, that what if you're not happy with it as a parent? You see your child in an interfaith marriage. How to deal with that? That's also part of the question, right? Okay, so I'm going to say a few things. Number one, I think it's, and that's really a number one. That's the foundation of it all, not just with interfaith marriage, but with parenting altogether. And we have to recognize as parents that a lot of parenting has nothing to do with us. A lot of the way that our children come out to be is really in Hashem's control, not in our control. One of the most extreme examples is I use the words of the Midrash. That is about the words of the Midrash speak about the king Chizkiyahu, whose name in English is Hezekiah. Is that how you say it? Hezekiah. Thank you. Hezekiah. Chizkiyahu, Hezekiah. Hezekiah apparently did not want to have children. The prophet of his times, Isaiah, came to him and said, Chizkiyahu, why aren't you fulfilling the first mitzvah of the Torah, being fruitful and multiplying? And Chizkiyahu says, that's because I have this sense of prophecy, and I can see that the child that I will give birth to will be very evil. So I don't want to give birth to him. And Isaiah responded to Chizkiyahu, you know what? That's God's department. You do what you need to do, and let God decide what he needs to do in his department. He gave birth to Menashe. Menashe became an evil king. An evil king that was a murderer, that filled the land of Israel with idol worship, but it was out of his hand. It had nothing to do with him. So a lot of parenting, we have to accept, has really not much to do with us. Yes, we have to try our best. Doesn't mean that we have to sit on the pool all day and suntan and forget about our children. But we have to invest and give our all. But at some point, we have to also recognize that from every Abraham and Sarah, there's an Ishmael. From every Jacob, Yitzchak and Rivka, there's an Esav that is born, as it is in our biblical family. So that's an important point. So we can't beat ourselves down, etc. And sometimes it's part of their mission on earth. It's the mission of those souls. What can we do? It's beyond us. That's number one. Number two, I do think that there are two ways, and we find that in the Jewish world throughout Jewish history, to deal with interfaith couples. One way is to be extreme, to excommunicate those types of people. We've seen that in Jewish history also. Oh, you've gone against your very own Jewish faith. You are consciously deciding to cut yourself off from that everlasting chain that has been carried on with tremendous self-sacrifice by your grandparents who were Holocaust survivors and by so many others. You are cutting yourself. So we will cut you off. That's one way of dealing with it. I don't think that way works, especially not in our generation. Our generation, that sometimes their sign of rebellion is just a sign of thirst. They're just thirsty for love and thirsty for connection. As one great TED Talk put it, that the opposite, in a different department, but the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. Because people they fall into addiction because they really want to connect, but they don't know how. I think that's true with rebellion. I think it's true with doing things that are against our very clear values. And therefore, I think we have to increase that connection and love even more. Even if they are in an interfaith relationship that goes against our own values and again stops that everlasting chain from continuing on and on. We have to love them and love them and love them even more, because you never know. That soul one day may wake up and will want to return, but it will have no one to pull it in. Will have no bridge of connection to walk onto. And by loving them and loving them, you're ensuring that that bridge remains open for them forever. And not only that, but I will add one more thing. In Jewish thought, there is what's called a Jew that is born to a Jewish mother. And there is called a non-Jew that doesn't have a Jewish mother, but is named Zera Israel. What does that mean? A descendant of the Jewish people. That's maybe because he had grandparents who were Jewish, or maybe because his father is Jewish. And halakhically, the mother has to be Jewish, of course, unless the person converts. But again, there are sparks of Jewishness in the children that they may potentially have. And how dare we close the door on those Jewish sparks? And that's another reason to just love and love and love and keep that bridge wide open. Yes, Benita.
Devastated and very happy because
Mhm.
you know, everything you can imagine was what went through us, and actually succeeded in having him break up with her and that's it done.
Mhm.
But now, and we had a very, it was just that kind of thing, like there was a wall up.
Mhm.
They have a baby. And the way my daughter is, she's very, very faith-based in her religion. And we're grateful that our
Mhm.
faith with an understanding of what the belief is.
Right.
It's not what we chose. But I had that conversation with my daughter. And it opened up the door.
Beautiful.
Relationship.
Right.
Very open with one another. It's still not what we want.
Right.
But it is what it is.
Right.
And that baby is magnificent. And
Right.
Seriously, like,
No, good. And that's right.
Like this is like,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And so we have a lovely relationship, and we open the door for her. We understand how Paulson's going to be brought up. It's not the way we would like.
Right. That's how we know that Jesus was Jewish, by the way. You know how? Because he worked in his father's business, and his mother thought that he was God. So, so it's great that you think that he's the smartest of all. But I think that you're adding another important element to it, and that is sometimes we don't have the ultimate situation or the way we want it to be, and we have to focus on the blessings that we do have. Yes, Janet.
When you were mentioning someone that, like, let's say your son falls in love with a woman that's not Jewish, well, I don't see that being rebellious. I mean.
No, I understand. Yeah.
You fall, in other words, unless they said, I grew up Jewish, I don't like Judaism,
Right.
I'm gonna find a girl that's not Jewish. I mean, why did that become a negative?
Right.
Yeah, because it wasn't, just because it wasn't within our faith?
No, first it's important to, no, I'm glad you brought it. So that's right. Sometimes people just marry out of our faith, out of just simple ignorance. They weren't educated that way. So it's not a rebellion. You're right. But I will say that in essence, it is, as we mentioned, cutting off that chain that continues on and on and on, you know, and that our forefathers gave out their lives for that chain to remain intact.
Correct.
So it's a little,
It becomes rebellion.
it's a little selfish, I would say, and I don't know if rebellious, certainly selfish, and also on a more spiritual level. Look, I think the statistics are very clear. I wrote a letter to someone who's in a relationship like that now. I try to be as logical as possible because everyone speaks, you know, with everyone you have to speak their own language. But one of the things I mentioned is that statistically, and I researched this, 74%, that's 3/4 of interfaith couples, marriages, end up in divorce. Now, it's astounding, but no, Jews. It's a Pew study. Yeah. Jews with non-Jews. Now, no, 52, 53% is usually the divorce rate in America. So it's much more. 50, lower than 55. I don't exactly remember that percentage. I do know it's 74%. Now, it says a lot because it speaks to what we're speaking about here. And that is that at the end of the day, a Jew is a Jewish soul. that Jewish soul is what sets him or her apart from society. As by the way, other religions might have their own souls that set them apart too. Now, it sets them apart not just because they have a different set of values, that can also be a very important factor in relationships, because if I have a different set of values, it's going to clash with the set of values of my partner, and eventually that's going to create fights and schisms. But beyond the set of values, there's a soul there that has completely different desires, that is burning from within. I see it every day. A Jewish soul wants to not only be soulful and do good, as we said, and pray and all of that, but it also wants to be true to itself, which is true to its Judaism, true to its Torah, true to its ancestors. And if I marry a non-Jew, my partner will not only never be able to really relate to that part of me, don't have it, but also eventually I think it will also, that thirst will cause my soul to follow its calling just to quench it, and it will create a schism that I think is sometimes far beyond repair.
I mean, I have to agree.
Yeah.
Jews should marry Jews.
Yeah.
It just, I mean, it doesn't always work out that way.
Right.
Here's a perfect example of being kind and accepting.
Right.
because You have a happy home. You have a happy
That's right.
grandchild,
That's
you
right.
know, you're along the line.
Right.
Right.
All right, exactly. Yes, sir.
It's a younger child who goes out with a non-Jewish girl. Could you put a stop to it, or should you just let
Right.
them enjoy it and hope, hope that they'll, what do you do?
Right. So it's a great question. You have to have, I think, a combination in Kabbalistic language of chesed and gevura, of kindness and justice. And what this means is that they have to know where you stand. They have to know your principles, and they have to know that from your standpoint, this is not okay. Not because it's just not okay, those are the rules, but because you really believe that relationships like that do end up in divorce, that it's going to eventually bite them back. So they have to know your stance. On the other hand, also, I don't think that maybe our parents, my parents, maybe could have imposed their way of life on me, and I would have swallowed it. I don't think we live in a generation like that anymore.
No.
So I don't think we can just say, you know what, you're taking your car keys forever until you break that relationship. Or I don't think that works. You're grounded. I don't think that works. I really don't. Yes, but I think that children also, deep inside, first want to please their parents, but also if their parents can communicate this firm stance with love, then eventually they'll realize, oh, my parents might be right. It's like Mark Twain said, that when I was 8 years old, I thought my parents knew everything. When I was 18, my parents knew nothing. When I was 28, my parents knew something. It's amazing how much they learned in 10 years. But yes, Hannah.
I think that I found with some of my friends, even though they went to Jewish, the kids went to Jewish schools and all that, ended up marrying other people.
Yeah.
And from what I heard, it seems like when they do Shabbat, they do Jewish holidays, they'll do the Jewish tradition just to show the grandchildren what it's like to be Jewish. And I think that's
Fine.
seems to work.
I think that seems to work. And we hope also that, it's like a plant that needs to be watered. These are sprinkles that will eventually sprout something.
Her son married under faith, but so the mother was trying to be Jewish, but the child has another plan to go to Chabad, and he wanted to go to Chabad.
Right.
I don't know what it means for the child. I didn't want to, but we love that.
Right. Okay. No, good point. All right. So that's for that. Then let's relate. I know we have just a few minutes left. So 2 more topics here. American Jewish or Jewish American? What are you first? First of all, I don't think we live in a country in which these 2 titles really clash with one another. I think the Constitution was written by people who were inspired by Judaism. inspired by the Judeo-Christian values, as they themselves write. So I don't think they clash. But Golda Meir was once approached by Henry Kissinger, who said to Golda Meir, don't think that because I'm Jewish, I'm going to give the state of Israel any favors. You know the famous story? Because I consider myself first American and then Jewish. Golda Meir responded, well, that's great, because here in Israel, we read from right to left. so that's that. But Golda Meir, I think, answers this question. I think that if there is a clash, not that I see any, really, if there is a clash, as we've done throughout history, we choose our Jewishness first. Why again? Because it's in sync with who we truly are, with that Jewish soul that we've been speaking about. Topic number 2, I have a few friends now that need my prayers for a full and speedy recovery. For how long do I say it? Where did the prayer come from? Because we have two questions here. Where does the prayer of asking for a full and speedy recovery come from? It came from the Kabbalists of Tzfat some 400 years ago, even though there are very similar prayers in the Talmud too. And by the way, you don't need necessarily to use those prayers. Just shouting to God from the heart and saying, please, it's enough. Give them a full and speedy recovery is considered to be a prayer, maybe even a better prayer than someone reading the text robotically. So just keep that in mind. But until when do I have to say that prayer? So the halachic guideline is until that person has left the zone of danger. Yatsa miklal sakana, to quote the words verbatim. So if a person is not in a place of danger anymore, there's no danger to him or her, then you can stop saying that prayer. As long as there's some danger, one should continue to say that prayer. All right, I'll open this up for the 4 minutes we have left. Any other questions you may have? Yes.
Okay, so this is the deal.
Okay.
When people see me now, especially my friends that know me they say, you become so religious.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to be religious?
Well, what does it mean, religious?
Well, I don't know.
Because Judaism is not a religion. Say no. Say I don't. Jews cannot become religious because Jews don't believe in religion. If you're not religious, you're still Jewish. You're just as Jewish as me, who's considered religious. So Judaism is not a religion. So if they mean, that's the way I would say, well, you're so religious. I'm not religious at all. I'm Jewish. And Judaism is not a religion. But that's if you want to go into a philosophical discussion. Sometimes you don't have the time. So if they are referring to actions, to mitzvahs that there's no such thing. There's no such thing.
Italian, yeah, I was just gonna say, that's just interesting.
Yeah. That people would say, yeah. No, okay, fine. So if they are referring to deeds that you're doing, mitzvahs that you're doing, observances that you're observing, then I would say that that's the nature of every relationship. Every relationship cannot just be a relationship of the heart. I've used that example many times. But if I say to my wife, I love you and I love you and I love you and I love you and I'm so happy about our relationship, so happy and I love you and I love you. And then my wife says, hey, do you mind taking out the garbage? And I said, no, I love you, but I'm not going to take out the garbage. Then what's my love worth? So every relationship has to have deeds attached to it. The deeds of Judaism are deeds that are but an expression of our love towards God. I love you, God, and therefore I'll do what you want me to do, even though sometimes I'm just not in the mood. So if people tell you, are you becoming religious? You can tell them, no, I'm just in love with God and I'm showing him what my love is all about.